An entire Premier League dressing room, jerseys soaked, lungs still burning, went completely, absolutely, breathlessly silent. Not for a tactical adjustment, not for a manager's fury. Every professional footballer in that room stopped breathing because of a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines clawing her way back from the dead on a tennis court thousands of miles away. The phones came out. The halftime drinks went untouched. The coaches stood there, mouths open, watching what was unfolding on those tiny screens because nobody in that room had witnessed anything like this before. This is the story of the moment Alex Eala stopped the entire football world mid-match. And before this video ends, you will understand exactly why grown men, warriors of the world's most watched sport, dropped everything to witness one young woman refuse to surrender. To understand why a Premier League dressing room abandoned its halftime routine, you first need to comprehend the gravitational force Alexandra Eala had already become long before that match began. This was not coincidence. This was the inevitable consequence of something building for over a year, something that had been rewriting the boundaries between sports, between cultures, between what tennis fans watch and what the rest of the world notices. In March 2025, Eala, ranked 75th in the world at the time, reached the Miami Open semi-finals as a wild card, defeating Jelena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and world number 1 Iga Swiatek back-to-back-to-back. Three of the most formidable competitors on the planet dismantled one after another by a Filipino teenager who wasn't even supposed to be there. That run shattered every assumption about who this young woman was. It announced her to audiences who had never watched a WTA match in their lives. From Melbourne to the Middle East, she became a major attraction. Courts in Australia overwhelmed with Filipino fans, outside venues creating human bottlenecks of supporters who had traveled simply to witness her compete. Former professionals on major podcasts began asking, without embarrassment, whether Eala had already surpassed Sabalenka and Coco Gauff as the sport's most compelling attraction. At the 2026 Australian Open, Eala reflected on the phenomenon in a conversation with Andy Roddick, admitting she was lost for words after videos of the crowd during her first-round match, Filipino flags covering every visible surface of Court 6, queues stretching further than stadium administrators had ever seen. But it wasn't only tennis followers consuming her story. Something wider had shifted. In April 2026, days before competing at the Madrid Open, Eala graced the red carpet of the Laureus Awards, the so-called Oscars of sport, sharing the stage with Carlos Alcaraz, Aryna Sabalenka, Novak Djokovic, and Lando Norris. Wearing a beige Filipiniana gown designed by her own uncle, she stood at the intersection of global sport and stood there without apology, without intimidation, without shrinking. She told Tennis Channel afterward, "It was super inspiring, I cannot tell you, to see those people firsthand. When you see your idols and you see these athletes and you're able to see them in person, it reminds you that they are people and they are real." The football world noticed. Footballers had already been circulating her highlight reels inside team group chats. Her comeback victories, from the Abu Dhabi Open to the ASB Classic, were shared on platforms where tennis content rarely circulated. She had crossed the invisible wall separating sports audiences, and the coming match would obliterate what remained of it entirely. What were they about to witness? Stay locked in, because this is where the story ignites. Madrid was already extraordinary that week. Eala had opened her Madrid Open campaign by defeating Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, a French Open finalist, 6-3, 6-3, without dropping serve in critical moments. Afterward, she said she felt really comfortable and at home in the Spanish capital, where she had trained since childhood at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca. 2 days earlier, she had stood on the red carpet of Laureus, Filipiniana against the Madrid evening sky. Now she was back on clay, racket in hand, hunting for something far more consequential. The context of this match requires understanding what Eala was chasing. At the 2026 Miami Open, just weeks prior, she had survived a grueling 3-hour contest against Germany's Laura Siegemund, a match that stretched her physically and mentally to limits that would have fractured a less resilient competitor. She absorbed a tie-break defeat in the opening set, regrouped, and took the next two. That match had revealed something crucial. Eala does not process adversity the way normal athletes process it. She metabolizes it. She converts deficit into direction and keeps moving. Madrid produced an opponent with a detailed scouting report on exactly that tendency. The matchup was vicious from the baseline exchange. Eala raced to a dominant opening before her opponent, experienced, calculating, tactically superior on the surface, began dismantling her serve return patterns and forcing her back behind the baseline repeatedly. By the end of the first set, the crowd had shifted energy. By the midpoint of the second, the match looked finished. Eala trailed, not by a set, not by a game, by something deeper, by the creeping psychological weight of an opponent who had solved her, who had neutralized her greatest tools, who had reduced the most electric player on the WTA Tour to a corner with no visible exit. And then the halftime whistle sounded in a Premier League stadium 2,000 kilometers away. It was at this precise moment that a team physiotherapist, a Filipino national, stationed with one of England's most decorated clubs, pulled out his phone and put Eala's match on screen. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Every single player in that dressing room looked up, and none of them looked away. Nothing that transpired in that dressing room surprised anyone who had been following Eala's trajectory with genuine attention. Mats Wilander, 7-time Grand Slam champion and former world #1, described Eala's tennis as mystical, something that left observers asking themselves how a human being could understand the game at that depth, execute those specific shots, manufacture those specific escapes. He compared her to John McEnroe. That comparison from that source carries the full biographical authority of a man who competed alongside the greatest talents the sport has ever produced. Her 2025 season, the breakthrough that preceded 2026's expanding global footprint, saw her become the first Filipino woman to win a WTA 125 title, reaching her maiden tour final at Eastbourne and earning her first championship in Guadalajara. Yet the numbers, the titles, the rankings, none of these adequately explain the dressing room. What those numbers cannot capture is the quality that professional athletes across disciplines recognize instantly in one another, the willingness to endure beyond the point where surrender becomes rational. Premier League footballers understand that quality because their careers demand it weekly. 45 minutes down, tactical plan exposed, crowd turning, the capacity to reorganize internally and push through anyway separates the adequate from the legendary. They saw their own highest aspiration reflected in a young woman on a clay court in Spain. She was not playing for a Grand Slam title that afternoon. She was not ranked in the top 20. She was simply refusing, with spectacular stubbornness, to accept the outcome mathematics had assigned her. Her father, Mike Eala, once explained, "Alex is a fast learner and she never gets dispirited with every loss. In fact, it makes her stronger and fiercer." The footballers didn't know those exact words, but they witnessed the living demonstration of that principle and recognized it as something they had spent their own careers attempting to cultivate. She had become, without intending it, without announcing it, without requiring anyone's permission, a symbol that crossed every boundary sport had previously constructed around itself. Did she understand, in that moment, what she had done to an entire dressing room across Europe? Almost certainly not, which is precisely why it was genuine. Sport produces moments. Planned ones, championship victories, record-breaking performances, farewell appearances choreographed for maximum emotional effect. And then it produces the other kind, the ones nobody scheduled, nobody marketed, nobody could have manufactured. The dressing room moment was the other kind. Ayla had already proven her influence extended beyond tennis. Her appearance at the Laureus Awards, the Oscars of sport, placed her physically and symbolically alongside the defining athletes of her generation. She had been photographed alongside Novak Djokovic and Olympic gold medalists, her Filipino heritage visible and deliberate in a beige Filipiniana gown that her fashion designer uncle created specifically for the occasion. Quantum sandwiched between greatness, she wrote afterward, and meant it without irony. But the Laureus red carpet was a planned moment, organized, attended, photographed. A Premier League dressing room abandoning its halftime preparation to stream a tennis match on an unauthorized phone connection? That was not planned by anyone. That arrived the way genuine cultural significance always arrives, without announcement, without a press release, without a marketing department. Ayla herself said something profound in her conversation with Andy Roddick. I think that this year, the start of the season, was when I seriously noticed that it was coming. The people were really coming. The people were coming because she gave a reason that required no translation. Comeback tennis needs no subtitle for a footballer watching on a phone. The score communicates everything. The body language communicates everything. The refusal communicates everything. She had created a universal language out of a single sustained act of competitive will, and that language reached across stadiums, across sports, across the specific cultural geography that normally separates audiences into their designated boxes. Coco Gauff, asked about Ayla in a post-match interview, said, "Alex was a tough competitor. Even when I was up, I knew she could come back at any given moment. I've seen her do it before." A Premier League dressing room had now seen her do it. Millions of people who watched the clips shared across social media platforms in the aftermath had now witnessed it. Football fans who had previously never identified a WTA player by name began searching for her match schedule. She hadn't conquered tennis yet. The French Open waited. Wimbledon awaited. The US Open awaited. The genuine summit of her career remained somewhere ahead, not behind. But she had already accomplished something larger than any individual title could validate. She had made an entire world stop mid-task and pay attention. So here's the question this moment leaves behind, and it demands a real answer from you in the comments below. Is Alexandra Ayla simply a great tennis player ascending her sport's established hierarchy? Or is she something the sporting world has never quite encountered before? An athlete whose impact refuses to stay inside the boundaries of the game she plays? Leave your answer below. The conversation is already happening. Make sure your voice is part of it. A dressing room stood still. Halftime passed without tactics. Football paused because tennis, through one extraordinary young woman, demanded priority. That is not a normal occurrence. Nothing about Alexandra Ayla's trajectory is normal, and if the trajectory holds, if the French Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open deliver the stages her talent deserves, this dressing room moment will be remembered as the preview, not the peak. Subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell, because when the next Ayla moment arrives, and it will arrive faster than you expect, you need to be here before the dressing rooms are. This channel delivers the stories sport forgets to tell. Subscribe and bring someone with you.